With Penny Mordaunt, I think that she's been very, very keen to distance herself, or her allies have been very, very keen to distance herself. And it seems that the idea that she would be leader or looking to take over from Rishi Sunak anytime soon is basically is for the birds. She doesn't want to do it. I think even she knows. She held that sword, but with the poisoned chalice to actually take that mantle on. But I do think Rishi Sunak is slightly vulnerable after those local elections. The results, they're coming from a high point in those elections from 4 years ago when they were coming off the Tories were coming off the vaccine bounce and did very, very well. So I think it's going to be a very, very difficult night. Whether you get a situation where enough Tory MPs put in letters for a no confidence vote is a different matter. And if that happens, he's mortally wounded, and the party are in real, real trouble.
We found out today from YouGov in the Times that the Tories are only 4 points ahead of the Reform Party. This is very significant, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd be extremely concerned if you're Rishi Sunak especially going into those local elections. They're just chipping away at that Conservative support. If Rishi Sunak, what he's got to do is deliver a bigger picture and a bigger vision to his voters to try and entice them back. I mean, the way the polls are going, and we've seen some surveys done over recent weeks, it seems that Labour may have a majority of 250 seats come what the election. So it doesn't almost feel like Rishi Sunak is there to try and save the election. He's just trying to keep the Conservatives back in the game, put them in the game in 5 years' time. That's almost what his, part of his legacy could be, to make sure they have a chance of actually trying to win it in 2029.
And what about the implications of this for the lady with the sword, Penny Mordaunt, the leader of the House, who conspicuously failed to back the Prime Minister when challenged to do so by her Labour opposite number, Lucy Powell, today in the Commons?
Yeah. I think with Penny Mordaunt, I think that she's been very, very keen to distance herself, or her allies have been very, very keen to distance herself. And it seems that the idea that she would be leader or looking to take over from Rishi Sunak anytime soon is basically is for the birds. She doesn't want to do it. I think even she knows. She held that sword, but with the poisoned chalice to actually take that mantle on. But I do think Rishi Sunak is slightly vulnerable after those local elections. The results, they're coming from a high point in those elections from 4 years ago when they were coming off the Tories were coming off the vaccine bounce and did very, very well. So I think it's going to be a very, very difficult night. Whether you get a situation where enough Tory MPs put in letters for a no confidence vote is a different matter. And if that happens, he's mortally wounded, and the party are in real, real trouble. He'll probably win that confidence vote, but do you really want to go into the election knowing that a lot of your party just don't want you there?
Broadly, how clear Sir Keir Starmer was on, let's start with tax and spending.
I don't think he didn't spell out any big policy on tax and spend. And I think one of the reasons why he didn't do that is because I think he's so close to Rachel Reeves that he won't do anything without her giving the green light to it. But he did mention that taxes will go up under a Labour government, in as far as that he mentioned that the VAT on private schools, that policy, that stands. But one thing he did say was that he's not going to go for workers. So it seems like national insurance won't go back up. Obviously, the government have brought that down twice in the past few months. So there wasn't any big policy on tax and spend, very similar to where Rachel Reeves was the other day when she gave that Mays lecture to the city and business and finance groups there. It was very broad brush, and I think that's where they are. And I think one of the fears is that every time you get close, or now Labour are getting close to an election, they just fear that the Conservatives will steal their policies, like they did on the non-DOMs policy at the budget just a few weeks ago.
There are some people who are very concerned that Labour is also getting too close to the centre, too close to the Conservatives. What kind of differences did he strike out? What kind of genuinely Labour territory was he able to sketch out that will please traditional Labour voters?
In this, it was very much sort of a general interview. But one thing where he did come slightly unstuck on was the triple lock. And I think one of the reasons was that is because, and speaking to people close to Sir Keir, is that they're going to stick very closely to what the government do on the triple lock. Because the government haven't wholly committed to the triple lock in the next manifesto, it means that Labour haven't really done so either. And if the government abandon that, it then means that Labour have got to fill quite a big black hole on that policy as well. So I think they're gonna stick close to their guns at the moment, and then see what the government do. And if they junk that policy towards the election, if there is another sort of financial statement before the election, they'll just closely monitor the situation. But I think both parties know that getting rid of that policy, when you have so many pensioners who go out to vote, that I think they both realise that'd be utter madness. So he did sort of, what did I say, stumble across that answer, but didn't commit to the triple lock, because I don't think he's in a position to do that just yet. But I think deep down, I think most people know that they will probably stick to that.
Let's have a look at another area of policy that's in the headlines today, Rwanda. And he has hammered the Prime Minister on this at PMQs. This is an area that Yvette Cooper has been making a lot of waves with as well. But how much scrutiny did he come under for what Labour would do differently when it comes to Rwanda? He wants to stop the boats as well, I assume, but he doesn't want to go with the Rwanda plan.
Yeah, no, one of the key things that he wants to do, he wants to stop the people smugglers upstream. So what he will do is work with European law enforcement groups. He'll work with Interpol and actually get more resources into sort of mainland Europe or further down the streams to actually make sure that the issue is being tackled.
When he says this, though, one wonders what he means, because if it were possible, then surely the current Home Secretary, James Cleverly, or his predecessor, Suella Braverman, would have done it.
Well, that's right. And that's one of the problems that he's got, whether he's going to make sure that British officers can go into, spend more time in France and be in sort of control rooms and actually be in charge of operations or not. That's going to be the crux of whether there'll be a difference, because at the moment you do have border force officials patrolling the beaches. They are looking in the sort of monitoring centres to see what's going on in the channel, but they don't have operational control. So I think one thing that Keir Starmer, if he does want to create more, let those border force people actually have more control over the situation, they actually need to be running the operations. And also it comes back to how much money you want to spend. They're very keen on they would get rid of that Rwanda policy, but how they're actually going to tackle the problem, actually reduce the numbers.
In previous elections, Ryan, the NHS has been at or near the top of the agenda. Any clues as to how Sir Keir and the Labour leadership would run the NHS differently from the current mess that many people think it's in?
There wasn't any clues in this interview per se, but I think, in reading between the lines of what Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, has said, that they are very keen to sort of definitely use, they need to have a more grown-up conversation about the NHS, and whether that is trying to find spare capacity within the current system or spare capacity within the private sector. I think that's one route they will definitely go down. And I think the interesting thing on Labour against the Conservatives when the NHS is a lot of things that the Conservatives do on the NHS and delving more into the private route, they get attacked for it. But I think if Labour do it, I think they can just they may be able to get away with it a little bit more.
Well, I'm not sure those private finance initiatives from the 90s, they've got a very long tail.
Yeah, but I certainly think using capacity, if it's not being used in the private sector, is definitely one route they will go down, especially if they can get it at a cost level.
Yeah, and Ryan, in your piece in The Sun, you have listed Sir Keir Starmer's biggest U-turns, and you call him man of many faces. What face came through in tonight's interview? How does he account for these U-turns? Is anything coherent coming through?
Well, I thought one thing that was really interesting, and he was on the front foot very quickly on this, that he says that he doesn't want to let the voters down. So when you get politicians ahead of elections giving big promises, he says he just wants to be straight with them. He doesn't want to go into that election promising, promising the earth when he just can't deliver, because the financial headroom that the Chancellor has had over the last few budgets, or the financial statement, has been pretty limited. So I just don't think that he wants to go in there over-promising and under-delivering.
And not wanting to squander a 20-plus point lead in the polls